Hello everyone, welcome to our Montessori training. Today we shall be looking at one of the key curriculums in Montessori system of education, which is the sensorial education. I am your facilitator for this program. My name is Mrs. Maureen OLA-WILLIAMS. Before we go into sensorial education, I would like to refresh your memory on the Montessori system of education. What is Montessori system of education? Montessori is a system of education that deals with stimulating the children's senses with the use of their hands with some materials in a prepared environment. If you can recall, in our last class, we did a biography of Dr. Maria Montessori, in which I told you that Dr. Maria Montessori was opportune to work with children who are mentally retarded. Now, she was placed in a classroom filled with children who are disabled. She realized that in this classroom, they were starved of stimulation, which means the classroom was not stimulated, had no materials, and was neither painted. And she thought to herself, if these kids were being placed in a dry environment, in an environment that lacks stimulation, probably their senses would never be stimulated. And she felt, how can I stimulate their senses? She thought to herself, by using a prepared environment. And I recall, and in our last training, I explained that a prepared environment is an environment that's prepared to suit the need of a child. It must be conducive, it must have the right color, and it must be appealing to the eyes. Aside the prepared environment, she also worked with some materials which she used to prepare or stimulate their senses. Now, today we are looking at one of the curriculums that she created, which she called the sensorial education. Now, what is sensorial education? From the word sensorial, we pick a key word, which is the senses. Now, what is the senses? We perceive our world and our environment through our senses. We communicate with nature, communicate with one another, understand nature and understand our world only through the senses. There is an ancient saying that says, there is nothing in the intellect that was not first in the senses, which means the senses is the key to everything around our environment. She thought to herself, how can I stimulate the senses and make it active to be able to absorb the positive part of the environment? That's where the sensorial education came in. The sensorial education focuses on lessons and activities that help stimulate the five senses, which are the sense of taste, the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, the sense of feeling, that's the touch sense. And aside that, Maria Montessori also came up with 9 senses that she felt needed to be stimulated to help children finally perceive the environment, clarify the environment, and interpret the world around them. The sensorial education is quite wide in the aspect that it covers a lot of senses. Dr. Maria Montessori, she actually came up with 9 senses with all the materials that will be used to stimulate the senses. But before we start, I would like us to look at the significant teaching points in the sensorial education. In Montessori Academy, we believe that every child needs an education that fosters a lifelong love for learning. We introduce them to a teaching technique that is both fun and beneficial. Sensorial development helps to build necessary skills, which include cognitive, logic, and of course, the muscular skill. Let's look at the significant teaching points in sensorial education. The first teaching point is what we have here. Provide the child with sensorial motor activities. Provides the child with sensory motor activity. Number 2, the child accomplishes one step at a time and gradually moves on to accomplish a more complicated task. Number 3, where possible, each sense is isolated to provide an intense experience. Number 4, where possible, there is control of error so that the child can correct his or her mistake. Number 5, the directress activity is minimal and the child's rate of activity is at maximum. Number 6, where possible, the exercises are individual because each child develops and progresses at his or her own pace. Number 7, the child works in an orderly way because of the way the materials are designed and presented. Number 8, sensorial materials are made for designated purposes. Number 9, the design and presentation of the materials encourages the child to be self-disciplined. Number 10, the apparatus helps develop the child's muscular coordination and some prepare the muscles for later specific tasks. Number 11, the child's language development is enhanced. Number 12, they provide the child with both direct and indirect experiences in the field of mathematics, reading, science, and music. Now, what are Montessori sensory materials? Montessori sensory materials are creative tools or toys used in Montessori classroom that boost the child's 5 senses, enabling them to learn better. There are different kinds of sensorial materials designed to arouse the child's interest to learn. Going back to the history of Dr. Maria Montessori, remember I told you that she worked with children who were isolated and kept and abandoned in an unstimulated room. She thought to herself, if I could stimulate the senses, that means there is hope for these children. She went ahead to create this wonderful curriculum, which every child in the world enjoys today, both special and normal children. We're going to be looking at the 9 senses that Maria Montessori came up with and the materials to stimulate these senses. The first sense we are looking at is the chromatic sense. What is the chromatic sense? This is a sense that differentiates between colors. It's a sense that is able to identify colors and differentiate between its shades. Now, what are the materials that are used to stimulate these senses? We have what we call the color box. Now, this color box is divided into 3. We have the color box 1, which is the primary colors, the color box 2, secondary, the color box 3, tertiary colors. Now, let's look at what we call the color box. This is called the color box. It has the primary colors. The color box has the primary colors. Just like I said, we have the color box 1, we have the color box 2, and we have the color box 3. So under the chromatic sense, it is the ability to stimulate the sense of colors to be able to differentiate between the shades of colors, starting from the primary colors through the secondary and the tertiary colors. Now, the materials for stimulating these senses, as I said, is the color boxes, which is what I have here. We have color box 1, color box 2, and the color box 3. The second sense is called the auditory sense. What is the auditory sense? This is the sense of hearing. The auditory sense is the sense of hearing. Now, what are the materials that are used to stimulate the senses? It's what we call the sound boxes, or rather, the sound jars. The essence is for a child to be able to hear things from the environment and to be able to clarify, interpret, and understand what is happening on around her. Now, the material that is used for this is called the sound boxes or the sound jar. Here we have the sound boxes. In this box, we have jars that has different colors. We have jars that has different sounds. Now, the essence is to be able to hear the sound and then match with the corresponding sound. That's why you have two boxes, which has two different kind of sounds. So the whole essence is to be able to hear a sound and then interpret the sound from the other box. So this is the material that is used to stimulate the sense of hearing, the sound boxes. It is important to note that there are four classes of sound. We have the silence, we have the human voice, we have the noise tone, and we have the musical tone. The essence of the auditory sense is to help to stimulate the child's hearing pitch, for the child to be able to understand and interpret the noises or the sound that comes around him or her. So the materials that I said earlier used to stimulate the senses is what I call the sound box. This is the sound box. This is called the sound box. And in this sound box, we have different jars with various sounds. Each box is identified by a different kind of color. Now, each of these boxes has 6 different jars that comes with different sounds. So the whole idea is that the child hears a particular sound and is able to match it using another sound. So if this sounds like stone, I have to look for another jar that sounds like stone. So by the time the child hears this sound, the brain interprets and then is able to match with the corresponding sound. That's the essence, to stimulate the child's hearing senses, for the child to be able to perceive sound around his environment, clarify and interpret sound. That's the essence of this sense. The third sense is what we call the tactile sense. The tactile sense. What is the tactile sense? Tactile sense is a sense of feeling. The sense of feeling. The hand feels and the brain interprets. What material do we use to interpret this sense? It's called the touchboard. What is the touchboard? The touchboard is a wooden flat material that comes with different texture at the top. This is what we call the touchboard. Now, in this touchboard, we have different surfaces. We have the smooth surface, we have the smoother surface, and we have the rough surface. So we have rough, smooth, and smooth. The essence is that the child feels this texture and is able to interpret it with his senses. That's why it's called the sense of feeling or the sense of touch. This board is what is used to stimulate these senses, which is called the tactile sense. The hand feels and the brain interprets. On the surface, we have smooth, rough, smooth, rough. So by feeling the board, I get to understand that the surface is rough. By feeling the board, I get to interpret that the surface is smooth. So I don't get to work with my eyes, I get to work with my hands, which is the sense of touch, the tactile sense. We have other materials that are used to stimulate the senses. Aside the touch board, we have what we call the touch fabric. We have different fabric that comes in different texture. We have the fabrics that are smooth. We have the fabrics that are fluffy or hairy. The essence is that the child feels these fabrics or feels this material and is able to interpret just by the feeling of the hand. That's all about the tactile sense. The next is the gustatory sense. Now, the sense of taste is based upon the ability to differentiate between different kinds of taste. Here we have the sweet taste, we have the sour taste, we have the bitter taste, And we have the salty taste. The whole essence of the gustatory sense is to be able to differentiate the different kinds of taste, which is the sweet, the sour, the salty, and the bitter. How are these senses stimulated? They can be stimulated by using what we call the tasting bottles, or you can have different kinds of material which are edible. Remember, in stimulating this sense, we must use materials that are safe and are edible. Dangerous materials or unedible materials are not allowed in this exercise. We have what we call the tasting bottles, or you could get bowls and have the sweet taste, the sour taste, the bitter taste, and the salty taste. Here I have a bowl, and in this bowl I have a sweet taste. I have the sugar, I have the salt, I also have the bitter taste, which is the bitter leaf, and I have the sour taste. What can you use to stimulate the sour taste? You can use things like the lime. For the sweet taste, you can use things like the honey or sugar. For salty taste, of course, you have to use the salt. And then the sour taste, as I said, you use the lime. Now, the whole essence is that the child gets to taste this and then the brain interprets. So in the whole sense, I don't have to tell the child that this is sweet, this is bitter, this is sour, or this is salty. By tasting a food or tasting a flavor, the child is able to differentiate between each of the tastes. So the whole essence is to help to stimulate the sense of taste, which are sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. That's it about the gastric sense. The next is the olfactory sense, which is also called the sense of smell. What is the olfactory sense? The olfactory sense can also be called the sense of smell. That means the child inhales, perceives the environment, and is able to interpret his or her environment. It's a sense of smelling or the sense of interpreting the environment through the nose, that is the smelling. What materials are used for this exercise? We have what we call the smelling jar. We have what we call the smelling jar. Now, in this smelling jar, you have different fragrance. Each jar comes with different fragrance. Now, in each of these fragrance, you have to be very careful and ensure that the fragrance are not dangerous to the health of the children. In one fragrance, in one of the jar rather, you can have the onion. In the other, you can have a lemon fragrance. You can have an orange fragrance, or just different kind of fragrance. The whole essence is that the child perceives a fragrance and is able to tell you what he or she is perceiving. Most importantly, to interpret the environment just by perceiving. So a child could come into a room and tell you, oh, the room smells like lemonade, or the room smells like an orange. So by smelling, the child is able to interpret his or her environment. The other is this visual sense. The other sense we have is called the visual sense. What is the visual sense? The visual sense is the ability to differentiate objects by forms, color, and sizes. The ability to differentiate your environment by color, sizes, and form. What are the materials that are used to stimulate these senses? We have various materials under the visual sense. Remember that I said the visual sense is a sense of differentiating the environment or materials by its size, by its form, or by its color. We have the most popular material, which is called the pink tower. It's called the pink tower. Now, what is a pink tower? By looking at it, it looks like a tower, which is where the name was gotten from, the pink tower. The pink tower actually comes in 10 cubes, all with various sizes. Now, from this material, it is obvious that they come in different sizes. So the ability to identify these cubes by sizes falls on the visual sense, and also by color. The pink tower is identified by the pink tower, which is where it got its name from, the pink tower. Another material that is used under visual sense is what we call the broad brown stairs. This is called the broad brown stairs. Now, by looking at this material, you could understand why it is called the broad brown stairs. Number one, it is broad, it is brown, and it comes in the form of a stair. Remember, under visual sense, we are looking at identifying objects by form, by sizes, and by its color. So under the visual sense, we have the broad brown stairs, we have the pink tower, and we have so many other materials. Here, a child is able to differentiate the stairs by its size, by its color, and by its form. And then at the end of the day, a child is able to build the stairs, build the block in such a way that it forms a stair, which is where the name came from, the broad brown stairs. So after working with the material, the child should be able to arrange the material based on its sizes and its form so that it forms a staircase form. The other material under the visual sense is what we call the long rod. This is called the long red rod. Why is it called the long red rod? Because it is long, it is red, and it's a rod. So, merely looking at this, one should be able to understand and differentiate these rods by its sizes and by its color. Now, the essence of this is to be able to identify this rod by various sizes. The rod comes in 10 rods, and each of the rod comes in different sizes, from the biggest to the smallest. So it's called the long red rod. Identifying rod based on their sizes. And at the end of the day, the kids get to work with this rod and form various shapes. One can form a maze by using this rod, or can come up with different games and different forms just by working with this rod. Remember, the long red rod. Now, another material under the visual sense is what we call the knob cylinder or the knobless cylinder. We have the knob cylinder and we have the knobless cylinder. This is called the knob cylinder. The knob cylinder. Why is it called the knob cylinder? It is called the knob cylinder because it has a knob. What's a knob? A knob is just where you have to hold on to pull out the cylinder. Now, this cylinder comes in different sizes, different shapes and different sizes. This is actually an empty cylinder for you to see the sizes that it comes in. Now, looking at this cylinder, one will tell that it comes in different sizes and in different forms. Now, this is what we call the knob cylinder. The knob cylinder came from the word because it has the shape of a cylinder and it has a knob. That's why it's called the knob cylinder, which is under the visual sense, differentiating between the sizes. The cylinder comes in different sizes from the smallest to the biggest. Another sense we have to look at is what we call the stereognostic sense. The child learns to feel objects and make recognitions based on what he feels when the hand and arm moves around the objects. Now, when the hand and arm moves around the object, it forms an impression. This is under the stereognostic sense. Just by feeling a material or by laying your hand in a material, the child is able to use what we call the special sense, which is called the sixth sense as well. What do we use in stimulating the sense? We use what we call the mystery bag. This is a mystery bag. What do we have in a mystery bag? A mystery bag, just like the name implies, mystery bag. No one knows what is in the bag. But of course, it will come with different materials that the child is expected to feel just by touching and be able to interpret the material inside. Now, this material can be shapes, it can be anything, it can be a shape, it can be a form. The whole essence is that the child feels the material and is able to interpret or tell us what is the material. This sense is also called the special sense and can be called the sixth sense. The next is what we call the thermic sense. What is the thermic sense? The thermic sense is the way of differentiating between different degree of heat. The child works to refine his senses of temperature through the thermic sense activities. Now, what are the materials that are used to stimulate these senses? We have what we call the thermic bottle. The thermic bottle are simply bottles that get heated up to different degree, not so hot that a child cannot hold it, and it must not be too hot that it burns the hand of a child. The whole essence is to be able to differentiate between different degree of heat. That's the hot, the warm, and the cold. The material that is used to stimulate this sense is called the thermic bottle. The next sense is what we call the baric sense. The next sense is called the baric sense. What is the baric sense? The baric sense is simply the sense of width, the sense of differentiating between width. Now, the strength of this activity is heightened when a child is blindfolded, which is the reason why the sense only falls within the sense of width. Now, the whole essence is that the child gets to feel different materials and get to interpret it without looking at it. What material do we use to stimulate this sense? It's called the baric tablet. This is called the baric tablet. The baric tablet consists of different tablets with different weights. Some are light and some are quite heavy. So how does the child work with this tablet? The child gets to be blindfolded with a cloth and then gets to lift two tablets, weigh the tablet without looking at the hands, and get to interpret which of the tablets is light or it's heavy. He gets to do it over and over again until he matches the same tablet that comes with the same weight. The whole essence is to be able to differentiate between different weights of objects without getting to look at them. That's why this exercise is heightened by blindfolding the child, to prevent the child from looking at the material before interpreting. The next thing we are looking at now is what are the benefits of sensorial education. What are the benefits of sensorial education? Sensorial education comes with a lot of benefits. Just like Maria Montessori said, that a child is not senseless. Every child has a sense that needs to be stimulated. And by using these various materials, these senses are stimulated. The child gets to walk, observe his environment, clarify his environment, and get to interpret his surroundings just by the use of the senses. From Maria Montessori, she said that if a child's senses is better stimulated in a prepared environment, then learning can occur. And if these senses are stimulated within a prepared environment, that's what we also call the absorbent mind. The mind gets to absorb from the environment, giving meaning to every details that he or she comes around. Now, what are the benefits of this exercise? Number one, it develops nerve connection. The sensorial education develops nerve connection. The sensorial education helps to enhance a child's memory. It helps to enhance a child's memory. The sensorial education helps to build a child's cognitive skill. A child's cognitive skill can be built on and enhanced on just by working on these materials. The next one, the sensorial education can help to stimulate the child's fine motor skill. How are these motor skills stimulated? Because he gets to work with these materials, the hands are moving, and the muscular skills are also stimulated. Under sensorial materials, it helps to promote critical thinking and problem solving. Now, these activities help to make a child independent. The child gets to walk alone, but with the guidance of the directress. The sensorial education helps in calming children. How can a child be calm with this activity? If you have to work with this material, then you have to be calm. Calm in the sense that you work in stages to achieve a result. And because they have inbuilt error, when a child is working with this material, and if there is an error, the child will pick the error and get to start over and over again until he or she achieves a good result. Sensorial education also helps to instill independence in a child. How does it instill independence? You get to work on your own, get the result, and feel fulfilled. Sensorial education helps to satisfy the need for order. Now, in a Montessori environment, there is need for order. A child needs to learn how to keep things in place, how to be orderly, to maintain a stable environment. Sensorial education helps to reinforce a childhood development. It helps to reinforce childhood development. It helps to strengthen so many skills, making the child a total and independent child. We've come to the end of this class, and I hope with these activities and this explanation, you're better informed on the importance and benefits of sensorial education. Having in mind that Maria Montessori had the intention to stimulate children's senses and make them better individuals. With the help of sensorial education, children are better, children are more independent, children are better stimulated, their senses come alive, their environments are better interpreted. It is clarified, it is classified, and most importantly, it is better interpreted. Thank you so much for engaging in this learning. I hope you understood the learning and I hope you enjoyed the learning. I'll see you next time in our next edition. Stay blessed.